Have you been told you need to stop doing what you love, whether it's exercise, running, or a sport? Well, here at Dynamic, we don't like that answer. In this podcast, we'll talk to leaders in the health and wellness space from Southwest Florida to get the solutions you need to get you back to doing what you love. Welcome to the Dynamic Naples Podcast. What's going on, Southwest Florida? Today, I have a special guest. I have Jim Saint-Amour on the show. Jim, thank you for coming on. How are you doing today?
Hey, you're welcome. Thanks for having me. I'm doing great. Thanks. How are you?
Good. So Jim is a running coach here in Naples, which we'll dig into all the variety of services he offers. But first, Jim, I just wanted you to tell us a little bit about yourself, where you're from. We'll start there.
Yeah, so I was born in Eastern Pennsylvania, grew up in upstate New York in the Utica area, and went to school in upstate New York as well for college. Lived in LA for about 9 years and then moved to New York City, where I lived for 14, 15 years. My wife is from here in Naples, and we got married here just about 6 years ago almost. And we moved down here 2.5 years ago. So I've been living in Naples for 2.5 years.
Oh, nice. Congrats. You made it. I always say it to people who've moved to Florida, to Naples.
Thank you.
Like, you found paradise.
It's great. Yeah.
Naples is amazing. Out of curiosity, where'd you guys get married?
We got married at the Naples Beach Hotel, which is
nice.
Unfortunately, sadly, no longer around. But yeah, we got married a few years before I think they're converting it into condos or a resort, Four Seasons or something like that.
Oh, is that over by Vanderbilt Beach? Is that like that Naples One development?
No, it's down. It's about, I want to say it's probably a good 4 miles south of Vanderbilt Beach Road.
Okay.
So it's over. They had a golf course down there too. So it's probably like maybe a mile or two north of downtown Naples. And if you're on let's say you're on the beach at Vanderbilt Beach Road, if you walked a few miles south, you would end up in the area of where the Naples Beach Hotel used to be. So
did it get crushed by the hurricane?
I don't know. I mean, it had closed down. I want to say like maybe a year and a half ago. So it closed down, and because it was purchased by a private developer, and I guess some of the things they were going through is they were going to make them into condos, and then I think Four Seasons bought them, and they're going to turn it into a resort.
Okay, got it. All right.
Yeah.
So let's get into the running. So what age were you when you started running? I mean, like running competitively, let's put it that way.
Yeah. Well, I was in 7th grade and joined the wonderful sport of track and field. I was a scrawny little kid, about 5 feet tall and about 95 pounds soaking wet. And the cool thing about that sport was it allowed me to try out a ton of different things. When I was in 7th grade, I did, the 100-meter dash. I did the 50-meter hurdles. I threw the discus. I did the shot put. And there was this little scrawny kid just trying a bunch of stuff out. And then when I was a freshman in high school, I started distance running for the track team, and I joined the cross-country team. So I'd probably say when I started, if you want to consider, me, racing 100-meter dash when I was in 7th grade as the beginning of my competitive racing career, I was probably 12.
Okay. Yep. Yeah. And then you migrated mostly towards like your bread and butter is like distance. That's what you love.
Oh, 100%. Yeah. That's the key. Yeah.
All right. And out of curiosity, like what draws you to distance running versus say sprinting?
Well, I mean, I'm more of a natural build of a distance runner. One of the things I enjoy with distance races is the ability to, to utilize tactics and strategy. I have pretty decent top end speed. I mean, nothing like what a sprinter will be able to do, guys, when they're, in high school or heck, even before that, people who are sprinters and they're developing themselves, for example, when I was in high school, I mean, putting myself up against a high school sprinter, there would be no competition. I mean, they would definitely be able to out sprint me in like a 100-meter dash. I'm just more built for distance running, like my type, my type 2 fibers and, slow twitcher are where I'm kind of at. But, but the ability to, use tactics and be able to kind of, as, like you do rate or 800 or the 3,000 or 3,200 meter race, you can go out and see how your competitors are doing. You can kind of respond to what they're doing. You can use, tactics, within each lap, ultimately going for a particular strategy at the end of the race. That's really enticing to me. And same goes as well for, like what a lot of adults do, a lot of adult distance runners do these days, which is, competing in half marathons and marathon races. Mm-hmm. The ability to be able to, use pacing and strategy is really, really cool.
Got it. Yeah. So you mentioned tactics. So I actually ran cross country for 2 years in high school. And I'm not a distance runner. I don't like it personally. And like, gotcha. I built the opposite of you. Like I played hockey and lacrosse. I was all power sprinting. That's kind of what I thought I was better at. But I kind of did it to stay in shape for hockey season. And, so I developed a strategy. So I would look at the other team warming up, and you kind of get a feel for who's good and who's not and who's in the middle. And so I'd find somebody that I thought was probably better than me, and then I'd follow them through the whole race. And it was almost like they were like pulling me through the race in a sense.
They were your rabbit.
Yes. And then at the end, I like the last, 100 yards or something, I would just sprint past them. It worked every time. That was my strategy.
Right.
That was my move. So
that's common. Yep. There you go.
Yeah.
Oh, for sure. Cool. Oh, yeah. Yep.
Cool. Okay. So, did you run cross country in college?
I sure did. Yep. At SUNY Oswego, State University of New York, college at Oswego. And I ran there for 4 years. It's a Division III school. Really good running program. Yeah, pretty cool. And and that was back in, I graduated in 96. So it was quite a while ago. Okay.
And have you ever taken an extensive time off running? Have you ever taken like a couple of years off, or have you been running consistently?
Yeah, I mean, man, between my senior year of college and my first marathon was like 7 or 8 years.
Oh, wow.
I stopped running for a long time.
Okay.
Yeah, I kind of had burned myself out a bit, actually. Uh-huh. And I trained like a crazy man, like my junior and senior year of college. Burned down a bit. And then a little bit of a wake-up call when I was 29. And there's kind of a funny story behind that if you want me to tell it.
Yes, go ahead.
All right. Well, I was living in LA at the time. Mm-hmm. And one of my several cars I owned there had broken down again. And I was in downtown, and I had gotten off the subway train, and I had to go to catch a bus. I'll never forget it. And I had to make 30 seconds. I had to sprint up the street, and I got to the bus stop, and my hands were on my knees. I was completely out of breath. And I'm like, dude, you are a shadow of your former self. Because I'll tell you, man, when I was in college, especially when I was a senior, I was crazy fit, super, super, super fit. Mm-hmm. Like one of my races I did a 5-mile race, and I averaged 5:15 a mile. And so I was really doing well. And so I was like, okay, this is a really big wake up call. Like, I am seriously out of shape. Like, I wasn't like overweight or anything like that, but at least I thought. And so my brother-in-law, he was going to run the Marine Corps Marathon, and this is like 10 months down the road. I said, hey man, if you train where you live, which was I think in Michigan at the time, and I was in LA, I said, I'll train here, and we'll both run it together. And so that's what I did. I created my own training program for myself. Yep. And I trained pretty hard. And I ran my first marathon at the Marine Corps Marathon back in, oh my gosh, I can't even think of it now. Maybe 2005, I think. And so that was my very first marathon. And that got me back into distance running.
And is that where Jim Saint-Amour coaching was born?
No, no, I actually, when I moved to New York New York City back in 2006, I started coaching about, I think 2008 or 2009. I want to just give a shout out to the Urban Athletics crew up in New York City. Jerry McCary, who's the owner, with his wife Kara, and Alan Batista. He was one of my co-coaches. So those guys were great. I coached with them. Jerry was really instrumental in teaching me a lot about, the art of coaching and methodology. And so I started coaching there. And the thing that led me to coaching actually was I taught briefly in New York City public school system. And I realized that I really enjoyed education, but public school teaching wasn't really for me. And I said, you know what? I really enjoy running. I enjoy education, and maybe I can combine them. And I found Urban Athletics, and they were looking for a coach at the time. And kind of the rest is history. At that point, I called Jerry. He said, hey, I'm looking for somebody, want to come up and meet me? And I talked to him, and he hired me right away. And it was great because he really gave me a lot of free reign to kind of learn on my own. My learning curve was really steep. I ran my own group ran and he gave me, he really kind of let me feel things out for myself, which I really owe a lot to him for doing. Mm-hmm. And that was the beginning of, I've been coaching now for, this is like year number 15.
Wow, that's incredible. I want to pause right there on that because I want to come right back to that. But I do want to go back to how you were talking about you took 7-8 years off. What? Because I'm a physical therapist. Obviously, I'm interested in pain and injury, right? So when you came back to running, did anything? Do you have any pain? Did anything present like a challenge to you that surprised you?
Yeah. You probably won't be too shocked by this, but within about a month or so, I started getting shin pain.
That's probably the most.
And I looked it up, and sorry.
That's probably the most common thing.
So shin splints. Yep. And I was reading about it. I'm like, man, so icing it and reading up on it, and so what I saw was that it's kind of a transitionary pain. From when a person starts from relatively no activity or low activity to increasing their activity, it develops. And thankfully for me, it probably went away after a few weeks.
You just adapted. Your body was probably like already primed for it. You just needed to kind of get through it.
Yeah.
All right.
Yeah. My body was like, oh, we're doing this again. Okay, I get it.
Yeah. So I'm assuming that's a conversation you have often with new runners, right? And like what to do about it.
That's right.
Do you have any go-to fixes for it?
It's to go talk to people like you. Pretty much. Yeah, for real. When all my runners, I tell them, I'm like, as a coach, since, like a person like yourself is the expert, I have certain strengths of my own that I feel like I specialize in as an instructor. Mm-hmm. But when it comes to ailments and stuff, I tell my runners, I'm like, look, and this is my injury guide. I say, look, if you got pain and you're on a workout, you got to stop and walk it off. And if it's gone, you can start jogging again. If it's gone, continue the workout. If it comes back, you got to stop and walk it off. And if it persists, you got to go see a PT right away. That's what I tell them, And luckily for me, I've been blessed. Really over 15 years, I've only had 1 or 2 runners who haven't been able to complete their program with me, which I've been really, really happy about. And, self-reflecting, I think it is about, I feel that my program is pretty gradual in the beginning, but I do build in a sense of you have to listen to your body. And I tell my runners, don't be here. If you got to stop a workout, always the next, But for sure, when people, especially like, my runner who you saw, I told her, she started with me and she was having this nagging, persistent, I think it was a shin issue or knee. I'm not really, I forget.
Yep.
But I told her, I'm like, go see a PT, because people like yourself you have the expertise of what to look for, and you have the machines and you have the technology. Me, I'm out there with them on a course. I don't have the technology, and I know, my strengths and also, my limitations as far as like what to look for. So, my general thing is if you're feeling pain, ice it, but I absolutely, if it persists, you got to go see a PT. You have to.
Yeah, and actually, I really love your advice to walk it off. I mean, there is more to that than just like taking a break. You're actually, because you have inflammation turns into swelling, because I kind of see inflammation and swelling as two different things.
Yeah.
Inflammation is stage one of healing. Swelling is leftover components that you got to mitigate, and that goes through the lymphatic system. And the best thing to do, the lymphatic system requires muscle action, light muscle pumping to get the swelling out of there. And probably the best way to do that is walking. So I think that's like fantastic advice.
Oh, thanks. Great.
Yeah.
I'm glad that's the right path.
Yeah, actually, I just had a buddy of mine who's strained his quad, and he's like, should I, go take some Advil? I'm like, no, go walk. That's what's going to mitigate some of that swelling, especially when it's an acute injury like that. So that's fantastic.
Yeah, I mean, like, the last thing I guess I would say, or just something to add on to that is, our bodies are so adapted. I mean, it's, we're living in a body that's, the modern human system's like 60,000 years old, so our bodies are intelligent. And if it's barking at you, there's obviously something happening that you should eliminate from doing. So, or at least just temporarily, maybe you started the run and you were too tight. Maybe there's some overworking going on, and also, one of my specialties is form and mechanics. Maybe there's something going on there, like, for example, I used to have, I had an awful case of IT syndrome, back, I don't know, maybe 2007, 2008. And I was having a bunch of knee pain. And I taught myself how to midfoot strike, after watching some really old video, like when YouTube first started out. And the New Balance had a great video on midfoot striking, and I taught myself how to do it. I didn't have any knee pain from that day on. Every now and then something would rear up. But so now many of my runners are interested how to strike the ground in a midfoot way as opposed to heel striking.
Yep.
And 'cause I found it really helps me too. So
yeah, I'm glad you brought that up, because it's a conversation I also have with my runners a lot. Because heel striking, I'm not saying heel striking is necessarily bad, but if you're having issues, that's the first thing I look at. Are you heel striking or midfoot striking?
Yep.
What we see a lot is, you see a lot of these cushion shoes. A lot of people think, okay, a cushion shoe, less impact. That's the thought. But it's kind of counterintuitive, because what actually really ends up happening, there's studies done this, that the more cushion there is, actually the harder you're pushing your foot into the ground, because you're trying to find the ground, right? So you need that sort of proprioceptive input. So and the hardest part of your foot is your heel. So you're hitting the ground with your heel to find input from the ground. So there's just the cushion shoe will tend to lead to a heel striking pattern, and that changes mechanics and may or may not cause pain. So I always tell people, like, if you were to run barefoot, you would never heel strike, because it'd be way too painful. So I think that's what really spurred the whole barefoot running sort of thing. And I'm not saying that's the right way to go, but I think midfoot striking is probably way better than heel striking.
Yeah, and on that too, one of the things I noticed when the barefoot craze came about, because I was coaching, that started a few years after I started coaching, and one of the things I noticed was people had a misconception that if they wear these minimal shoes, they're going to automatically midfoot strike, and that was not what I saw. And some studies, and I don't know if you saw this too, or if you would agree with this or not, but there was a lot of studies too that were showing that people wearing minimal shoes were still heel striking. And so that's when I realized, okay, people have to realize that their body posture is going to set them up for midfoot striking. So we would do drills, and I would get people, I'd video record them so they could see what it's like in the beginning. So with a lot of people, I got a midfoot striking at the end of one session, which I was like, yes, because it took me like a few weeks. So I would joke with my runners. I'm like, man, it's so great then I'm able to teach people how to do this in like 1 hour because like it took me a long time.
Oh, you gotta tell me. Do you have a drill that you use? Because it's a
Yep.
challenge to change someone's mechanics. What's
Yep.
your drill that you use?
Yep. So what we do is in a an initial mechanics analysis, what I will have people do is, so first they have to understand that the sensation of midfoot striking as opposed to heel striking in the beginning, if people aren't used to it, feels really different. So, going from the heel to the midfoot, even though it might not seem like a big deal, feels very significant. And as far as the difference is concerned, for example, what we do is and we have them is, and shout out to, this goes to Kara from Urban Athletics, because she also gave me some tips on this too. You imagine that you're like a ski jumper, right? And so you have your feet together, you're standing still, and you lean over like you're a ski jumper. And when you feel like you're going to fall forward, you take one foot, doesn't matter which one, and you let it just go out and catch you. You don't actively reach your leg out. You just let that foot kind of come off the ground and stop you from falling forward. And what will happen is, if you do it correctly, your foot's going to move like maybe a foot, and you're going to be on your midfoot. And what's going to end up happening is you're going to feel that there's going to be a bend in your leg, at your knee, from your upper leg and your lower leg, and you're going to feel that pressure on the mid part of your foot, and you're going to feel the pressure in your calf. So now the pressure is off your hard tissue, and it's actually, the energy is going into your soft tissue, as you know. So then what I'll have them do is I'll have them come back, and then they do the same thing with their other foot. I have them come back standing, and then what I have them do is take a few steps, keeping that forward lean going from their ankles. I tell them, don't lean from your waist, it's from your ankles. Another cue that I like to use, visual cues with my runners too, it's like, if there's a pole, if you're attached to a pole and you're tied to a pole from your ankles up to your head, right? So you can't bend at your waist, and then imagine leaning forward, right? So that keeps a rather upright posture, but still, like, even a 3-degree lean is going to help you fall forward a bit, and then you have to catch yourself. So generally within about 15 minutes, what I'm going to have them do is taking some very awkward looking running steps. So they're just kind of shushing along the ground a little bit. And most of the time, the feedback I get is a lot of people are like, wow, this feels really weird. It feels really awkward. I'm like, yeah, because you're now off your heel. You're landing more. Your center of gravity is out in front of you. The gravity is pulling you forward, and you're actually not working as hard as you might if you were heel striking. Because I know the big adage that around the running world is, if you're heel striking, you're breaking yourself, right? You're stopping yourself at just like, it's not like a massive amount of time, but like microseconds, you're stopping yourself. And over the course of any type of distance, like a mile, 2 miles, a marathon, that braking force is going to add up into fatigue, right?
Yeah.
So,
go ahead. Sorry.
Yeah, no, that's okay. So the final thing is, usually at the end of the hour, I have them running where they're kicking back their foot after it lands on the ground, almost in a circular motion, like the chi running, proponents might say, and for a lot of people, again, they're like, whoa, this feels really different. And a lot of, they're like, yeah, it feels so much better. Where some people might abandon it, and I do say this, and I'm like, look, you gotta be careful, because it's gonna change where the load factor goes. You're gonna feel it in your calves. And I say this all because this is what I experienced. My calves were pretty sore after I started doing this for the first time for a few days, but that goes away. But most people have to be careful. Their Achilles could get strained, and their calves could get strained too. So I tell people, I'm like, look, if you're going to pursue this, you got to be super careful. You have to back off if it hurts. You got to stretch like crazy. So that's what I tell them. And some people have kept it up. Others are like, nah, it's not really for me. So it's like, okay, but my whole thing is to try to like plant that seed.
Yeah. Some people can get away with heel striking and they're fine. So, okay. All right. That's right.
Yep.
But there's so many thoughts you stimulated while you're talking. First of all, I think we should record a video of that ski jumper drill. I think that's amazing. I've never used that or heard of it. I love it. What I do a lot of times is, Yeah, I got to see this in action, and maybe we'll get together and make a video or something like that. But one thing I
Sure.
do
Yeah.
is, I'll tell people to shorten their stride. Like if you watch like I don't know, Aboriginals run, they're barefoot. They actually have a very short stride. It's kind of actually almost funny to watch, because most people are overstriding.
Yep.
So one of the things I tell people
Yep.
to do is, I've read and I've done some continuing education on running that 180 strides per minute is sort of like the sweet
Yep.
spot for a lot of people. So if you set a metronome, and that's
Yep.
pretty quick, that's 2 strides per second, right? So if you set a metronome and stride every click of that metronome, it's going to make you take a shorter stride. So that's kind of where I start. But I definitely want to try a little ski jumper drill. That sounds awesome. Going back to
it's great. Yeah.
No, sorry, go ahead. Continue.
Oh. Yeah, no, I was going to say that the body positioning, the angle of the body at the beginning, and also there's one more component. When people are learning how to do this, the first step they take has to be a catching action, not an active reach out. If they can just catch themselves on the first one, that's going to set them up usually for the rest. Because the reason I say that is from my experience. If my runners try to reach out actively, most of the time they're going to end up just heel striking.
Yep.
So they have to let themselves catch. So the body posture is key. It's absolutely key. And that was one of the main things I noticed that was missing in the barefoot running shoe education is that, so I'm like, all right, they're not going to do it. I'm going to offer these things.
Yeah, there you go. Perfect.
Because there was no education about the body posturing. Except on like some videos and stuff. So that's why I said, okay, really, new runners would come to me, people would say my form, I'm like, let's also on your bike and check that out. So
got it. Yeah. So it sounds like a forward trunk lean is a really good cue as well. So you can probably just watch someone run and not even look at their feet, just look at their trunk and see what's happening. I'm imagining.
Yeah, that can be part of it for sure. Yep.
So I also imagine that like new runners, like maybe they didn't do cross country in high school or something like that. Like it's a skill, just like anything else. Running is a skill. And if you've walked your entire life, and because walking is heel striking, that's kind of normal gait, and running is different mechanics. I think a lot of people just translate their walking into running, and it's not it doesn't quite play out that way.
Well, and another thing too, inherently that's difficult is a lot of people come to coaches like myself because they can't see themselves run, and they're like, I need help with my form. I'm like, okay, yeah, that's good. I'm going to video record you. And most people don't know. So when they first see their form, they're like, oh, that's what it looks like. And it's like, yeah, I get it. The only time runners really get to see themselves run is if they run by a window or something, they can see their reflection. Right. And it can be somewhat shocking. Like, oh, that's what I look like. So yeah, I mean, another thing too, I recommend to people, just like in any sport, amateur athletes can learn a lot by watching professionals. And there's tons of great training videos of Kenyan and East African runners, Ethiopian runners, running races and also running track workouts. And a lot of those people have really great foot strike and really great posture. And so what I would recommend to people is if they want to get an idea of a really efficient way to carry yourself and also to strike the ground is to watch those folks do training. And there's tons of videos out there about it. There's tons.
I've seen a lot. And the very first thing you'll notice is that their foot, when it hits the ground, is directly underneath their hip. That's not out in front of them.
Yep.
You can almost draw a straight line from their ear to their hip to their ankle. And it's a big difference.
Yeah, for sure.
Another thing too, I see a lot, which I think contributes. Well, let me back up. So you mentioned sort of that braking motion, and I think that's the main mechanism for shin splints. Since that seems to be like probably the most common injury. So most muscles will get either strained, torn, irritated, tendonitis, any of those from the negative phase of what a muscle does. So if you picture a bicep curl, if you curl it up and then you lower the weight slowly, the muscle's still in tension, but it's lengthening. That's the negative or eccentric phase. Okay. So that's what tibialis anterior, that's the muscle on the shin, does. And so when your foot is coming down, the toes are coming down, the tibial anterior is under eccentric load. And that I think is probably the main mechanism for heel strike leading to a tendonitis or shin splint. Basically, it's kind of like a tendonitis.
Yeah.
I should mention too that true shin splints are a little bit different. We use the term shin splint to mean pain in the shin and tib anterior strain, but there is another condition that's actually a medical emergency where you have a compartment syndrome where you get inflammation and you have to get like relieved. That's a totally different thing. So when I'm saying shin splints, I mean basically tendonitis of the tibialis anterior. So I just want to throw that out there because that is a thing.
Yeah, I'm sorry. Can I just add something to that real quick?
Yeah.
I did have way back. I mean, this is like maybe a couple years into my coaching career. I had a runner who had like compartment syndrome.
Yep.
Talking about the compartments in their shin. I never heard about that. And they're saying like releasing the compartments. I'm like, wow, this is crazy. I had never heard about anything like that. So
yeah, there's fascia that like basically there's 3 compartments in the lower leg, and there's a fascia that wraps around a number of muscles that creates one compartment, and that thing can get so swollen and inflamed that it can start to compress nerves, and you get like a foot drop, and so then they have to kind of surgically go open the fascia, and I don't even know if they drain it or they do some sort of release to, because that can be kind of emergency. That's rare. I've actually never seen that in my career, but when people say shin splints, you kind of have to make that differentiation of which one there is. So we're talking about of the typical shin pain kind of variety.
Yeah.
The other thing I see a lot of, stiff calf, right? And this is why I think stretching calves can help is because tib anterior and the gastroc, the calf, they do opposite things. Tib anterior pulls the foot up towards your nose and the gastroc pushes it down like stepping on a gas pedal. So it's kind of like two different strings of a puppeteer.
Yep.
And if your calf is so stiff, it's pulling you down. And that's most people, because most people are wearing shoes that are elevated. So your foot sort of adopts that position, especially high heels. Or if you're in high heels all the time, your calf is going to tend to be stiff. Then your tib anterior has to fight against the restriction on the backside on the calf. So I always say it's like running with a handbrake on. So that's another mechanism I see a lot.
Interesting. Yeah. Okay. Yeah, I had heard, I mean, the description I heard was nowhere near as good as what you just said. But several years ago, I had heard that about shin splints, that possibly one of the causes was tight calves. Mm-hmm. So I would tell people, I'm like, hey, if you're feeling some shin pain, it could be due to your tight calves, Yep. And I don't know if that was about the extent as I could go with it, because that's just what I heard. So, okay, well, I'm validated.
If you're validated, you're fighting against your own restriction, basically. That's exactly what it is. So that's really common. I think those are the two main mechanisms. So
gotcha.
I want to bring up another thing, okay?
Yeah.
Because this is like, I don't want to say I'm passionate about it, but cartilage. So, because I hear people come into my office all the time. I got to get a knee replacement. I ran too much in my life, and now my cartilage is shit, and I have to get a knee replacement. I'm like, I just don't buy the fact that running breaks down cartilage. This whole wear and tear model, I think we're going to find out is wrong. Okay, maybe not wrong. You can do anything with really bad mechanics and screw up stuff, but I mean, there's been studies where they look at the cartilage of runners, like marathon runners, versus people who are sedentary, and the cartilage in the marathon runners are thicker.
Yeah.
And that's a general principle of the body. There's a principle called Wolff's Law. Like the more stimulus you put into a tissue, the more it grows. That's how bodybuilding works. Same is true of bone and tendon and ligament and cartilage. So I think we're going to find out, and I actually just dug up a paper on this, that you can have a gut dysfunction that leads to cartilage breakdown. I think that's going to be a bigger culprit. So, AKA poor diet choices.
Yep.
Sweet tooth, anybody? All right. So I think that we're going to find out has more damage to cartilage than running, because running is a normal human function. We're supposed to be doing that. You're supposed to be chasing stuff, throwing spears at it. So I don't know. So that's my little rant. I just had to get that out there because it drives me crazy. I hear that constantly.
I know. And, and the next thing I say, obviously, is a caveat that I'm not a PT and I'm not a doctor. But, one of the other things I hear too is, and let me know what you think about this. But, people bringing up the fact that, doesn't running cause arthritis? And in the beginning, I was like, I don't know, would that be true? But I mean, after reading, literature, the benefits, for example, running, increasing bone density. I was just like,
it doesn't add up, right? It doesn't.
Right? It doesn't really add up. So
right.
yeah, so I've heard those excuses too. Oh, my knees are bad. I'm like, well, you're not. I don't know. I mean, there's other things probably that are causing that. If you're running properly, or if you're, if you don't get into it gradually enough, maybe you could hurt yourself. But for me personally, again, and this happened to me as a runner. I'm not just, armchair worrying it from like, a perspective of, you can fix your knee issue if you have a midfoot strike. I'm not a super athlete, and my midfoot strike helped my knees. So that's why after that happened, and I know, listen, I'm only one person, and like you said, heel striking, could work for some people and work for them forever. But I have heard those similar arguments, and I'm like, man, I just don't buy it.
I don't buy it either. Yeah. So wear and tear, I call it sad and poor. So sad meaning standard American diet, like the standard American diet. I think poor diet choices, and then poor being like poor mechanics, like maybe you just don't know how to run, or maybe poor like loading issues. You were sat on your butt for 10 years, then you try to run a marathon without training, like some poor decision making. So I call it sad and poor. I think that's really more accurate than wear and tear.
By the way, on that note, what you said about, being, just sitting on your, in a chair for a while and then deciding to run a marathon. A lot of people, one of the most common questions I get from people is, how long should I give myself to train for a marathon? And I tell people a year, at least. It lets you go through a couple of macro cycles of training, as opposed to, I cringe now when I look at things like the 16-week marathon program. I'm like, ooh. Yikes. For who? Somebody who's done 12 marathons, or like a beginner? And, it just doesn't, I feel that person, like a year is a really nice time to allow yourself to gear up and get maximally fit for that effort, because one of the things about the marathon, man, I tell people, I'm like, it's an equal opportunity torture race. I don't care if you're an elite or if you're a person, who run your first marathon when you're like 55 or 60, it doesn't matter. And you have to get ready for it. And so sorry, that's just a quick side note about that.
Yeah, no, I love that. What about what are people missing in that program? So someone who wants to start running. So for example, I see like recovery being a big hole in people's game. They don't prioritize things like nutrition and things like sleep, What are some other holes in people's games?
Sure. So their VO2 max development is not there, and I think that's a major. They're and okay. So what I'm about to talk is very specific to each person. So I just want to.
You broke up there for a second. Can you repeat that last statement?
Oh, sure. Yeah, the stuff I'm about to mention is very specific to each person, and what I'm about to mention about is like speed, for example. So one of the big things I noticed that a lot of people are lacking is a couple of things. Their own individual development of their maximum aerobic capacity, and also their lack of development of their top end speed mechanics. And finally, I know you asked for one hole. I guess I'm giving
No, give me as many as you want. It's fine.
And finally, when we're talking about marathon training, not enough long runs, not enough. I mean, people may hear what I'm about to say and would cringe. But for most of my marathon runners, I like them to do 10, 20 plus mile runs. And now that is not every weekend for the last 10 weeks up to a marathon. It's spread out over the course of, the final 5 months, 4 to 5 months of their training. And the reason I say that is because, I've done 18 marathons. I've done 3 100-mile races, and I've completed a 50-mile race. I'm not saying that to pat myself on the back, but I am adding that to say that I've trained the improper way, and I've trained really the correct way. And the 3 things I mentioned, the lack of aerobic development, top end mechanic speed, and those endurance runs, Those are the things that need to be developed and to be able to get to a marathon. I don't care who you are, and get to that starting line and say, you know what? I know exactly what I need to do. And I got this race in my back pocket. And that's a huge thing. That can make a big difference between a person who runs a super confident race and feels great about their participation in the sport and a person who ends up at mile 16 with 10 more miles to go. And guess what? I've been there. And like, oh God, I wasn't prepared for this. I wasn't prepared. So, just those holes, what I have, and in fact, I have a runner right now I'm training, using that 1 year as a guide, okay? That gives you 5 to 6 months to train your top end aerobic speed. And what I'm talking about is 5K speed, 10K speed. I'm talking like fast. And what that is for you as an individual runner is for you. We both know about the VDOT system developed by Jack Daniels. I've been using that for my entire career. And, doing that phase training, you're not longer than a 10-mile training run, even 4 or 5 months in, 10 to 12 miles. But what you are focusing on is a lot of interval work, 400s and 800s. And the other hole I mentioned about their top end mechanical speed, doing some 200-meter repetitions, right? Mm-hmm. Okay. And again, are you 25? Are you 70? Are you 55 years old? What are the speeds for those workouts? I don't know. It's depending upon your own, ability. But then, and by the way, again, shout out to Jerry up at Urban Athletics, because he helped me develop this and he was really instrumental in that. But then finally, where I kind of developed my own program is kind of looking at this 5 to 6 month split between each of these things. Finally, with about 6 months to go for the marathon, that's when you start to move into your longer runs of 15 miles, right? 18 miles, longer lactate threshold development runs. If you can get up to, my best marathon, which was a 2 hour, 45-minute race, this goes back, I'm 49 now. I think it was 39 or 40 when I ran that. I had my tempo efforts were up around 10 to 12 miles, like in the high 5 minute per mile range and nonstop, like I was cranking them out. Mm-hmm. But I built up to that phase. And without that aerobic development from the first 5 months of your training, you can't get to those longer threshold elements because you got to build up your speed first. And in my non-scientific description or translation of what aerobic capacity development does, to me, it kind of teaches your body to shuttle around resources, the oxygen that you need, right? Mm-hmm. Those interval works, those 5K races that you'll go do maybe once a month, maybe a couple times a month, maybe. It really is intense, but it teaches your body how to use those resources. So when you get to the end of the second half of your marathon training, now your body knows how to use those resources. So you're in those longer tempo threshold efforts. And when you go to start do those long runs, you have the strength there to get into those runs and be able to finish them. And what ends up happening, man, you end up lining up on the race after a year of development safely. Again, letting pain be your guide, right? Got to back off if you have to. And man, there's nothing better. Like that PR race I just told you about. Uh-huh. I walked up to the start and I had it in my back pocket. And I'm like, I'm just going to go do what I'm going to do. I knew what my race pace felt like. I knew what it felt like. I just generally had been training with a regular old stopwatch, not a GPS watch or anything like that. And I'll go down the track and I would do my workout. Feel the pace was to be. And so I went on the road and I ticked off the miles at every single pace I needed to be at. So there you go. So those are the 3 holes. I would say high anaerobic development, your mechanical speed, and your long runs too.
Oh, that's a fantastic answer. Have you heard of Dr. Mike T. Nelson by any chance?
No, it doesn't strike a bell.
Okay, man, I think you would love his stuff because a lot of the things you're describing is what he talks about and puts the science behind it. For example, you mentioned lactate, right? So lactate is So people always say, oh, that burn is lactic acid. Well, really what it is, lactic acid disassociates into lactate, which is a fuel source, and
Mm-hmm.
acid, hydrochloric acid. And that's
Yep.
the burn you feel, is the disassociation of that
Yep.
hydrochloric acid and the lactate. What's cool about this physiologic flexibility program he put together, he talks about all these sort of homeostatic levers, and that's one of them, sort of the ability to tolerate that acid in the muscle.
Yep.
But what's cool is there's other systems like oxygen versus CO2. So oxygen is alkalinic and carbon dioxide is acidic.
Yep.
So if you get a buildup of CO2 in the system, that's also an acidic environment. So there's a term, you may have heard this term, CO2 tolerance, like how much can you hold, right?
Yep.
So someone who can hold their, like the we call them free divers that can hold their breath for like 4 minutes. They have incredible CO2 tolerance. Actually, I think you can hold it a lot longer than that. I think they're up to 18 minutes these days. So what's really cool about training these systems is that you can train one system and it confers benefit to another. So in other words, if you build up your ability to tolerate CO2 in your body, you will also be able to tolerate the quote unquote lactic acid buildup in the muscle. So you can improve your VO2 max. So doing something as simple as going for a walk and doing breath holds can improve your VO2 max. It's really cool stuff. So.
A funny side note about that. Well, maybe not so funny if you think about what he went through, but there's this guy, this great runner who's kind of like a hero of mine. Back in the 40s, this Czech runner named Emil Zatopek. Does that strike a bell?
No,
Emil Zatopek. So this guy was renowned for his training methods, and he is the one and only runner to have, well, I could be wrong. There might be an English runner about 5 or 10 years ago who did this, but there's a triple in the Olympics: the 5K, the 10K, and the marathon. And Emil, back in the 40s, won all three at one Olympics. And he jumped in apparently in the marathon in the last minute and he won it. But this guy's training methods are legendary. I recommend to anybody listening to do the following thing. But one of my colleagues back in New York, he said, yeah, like Emil used to do 200-meter sprints, holding his breath almost the entire time. I'm like, what?
There you go. Yeah, that's it. That's exactly it.
Use it with a word of caution. If you feel lightheaded, stop doing that.
That's so cool. I love that kind of stuff. Even things like thermal regulation. So a lot of people are getting into the saunas and ice baths. That can also confer benefit to all the things we're talking about. So it's all really cool science that's coming out now.
Yeah.
Okay, so tell me about some of the services you offer. I kind of looked at your website. You do one-on-one coaching, you do group coaching. Yep. Give me kind of a broad stroke of all your services.
Sure. So since I've been down here, it's only been one-on-one. I haven't really gotten any groups going down here, but it's mainly one-on-one services. If there's anybody out there listening who has a group of people who might want to get together and have group coaching, I can definitely do that. In fact, when I was in New York, each week I would coach 6 groups of people. So, throughout the week, 6 to almost 7 groups of people. So I used to do that a lot. Obviously, the running community up in New York is hundreds of thousands, if not, millions of people. So there were just people signing up for group coaching up there. I mean, the running community up there is awesome and it's huge. Down here, it's a little smaller. Mm-hmm. So like I said, mainly one-on-one. And I also do online coaching too. So if a person wants to just have, me send them what they're supposed to do every week, then I can do that. And they're like, no, I don't want to do any in person. I just want to be told what to do each day, through a schedule. And what I do is I use Google Sheets for that. Mm-hmm. I create a really nice spreadsheet. And they can still, even if they're just doing online coaching, they can still phone me, we can Zoom chat, we can text, we can email, no problem. But the one-on-one sessions are done at a day and a location that usually I try to cater to the runner. And one of the great things is I've discovered down here, a lot of the streets are often empty during the day. Mm-hmm. So for a lot of my runners, we've actually been able to do our workouts right in their neighborhoods, right in front of their houses sometimes. So that's been a really cool thing. So one of the things I discovered in New York is if you can make a course out of almost anywhere. So, any street, as long as there's not a lot of traffic on it. And so that's what we do. And the one-on-one sessions are generally interval based. We'll do faster 200-meter repetitions. We'll do 400 and 800-meter intervals, either of the maximum aerobic capacity type or the threshold building type. And with my one-on-one runners, I also included in the price is a weekly schedule as well. So,
very cool. How do people find you? Are you on Instagram, or do you have a website? Where is the best place for people to contact you?
Yep. So they can contact me through saintamourcoaching.com, and that's spelled SAINTAMOUR coaching.com. And I run that with my wife. She's also a certified coach as well. Or they can call me too. I'll give you I'll say my number. The best way to actually reach me too is by text or phone. I'm always have my phone with me, and that is area code 718-350-9348.
Yes, and I meant to ask about your wife because I did see her on the website.
Yeah.
So is she as avid as a runner as you are?
She is. Yes.
Yep.
Yes, she is. Yes, she's completed a marathon herself. And she is a big workout fanatic, more so than me. I don't do a ton of gym stuff, but she does both running and a ton of gym workouts. So she's really well versed with that as well.
Very cool. Is that her laugh in the background? Hi, Gabby. Maybe we should get you on the podcast too.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, I want to be respectful of your time. I really appreciate all this information. I'll make sure to post links to find Jim and Gabby in the show notes. And anything else you want to add, Jim, or do you think we covered everything?
Oh yeah, I can also, in addition to being able to contact me through my website, I can also, I'll put my email through the podcast here too. It's Jim Saint-Amour at gmail.com, and that's spelled JimSaintamour at gmail.com.
Perfect. Okay, Southwest Florida, that's all we have for you. We'll be talking to you next week.
Thanks a lot.
Thanks, Jim. Why guess when you can test? Do you get hangry or crash after a carb-heavy meal? These could be indicators that there is a dysfunction in your blood glucose regulation. If left unchecked, it can lead to irreversible changes. If you catch it quick enough, you can make diet and lifestyle changes that will get your levels where they need to be. 88% of Americans are pre-diabetic and don't know it. Diabetes underpins many of the pathologies we deal with in this country, such as obesity, high blood pressure, heart disease, and stroke. For some reason, it is rarely screened with your physician, and if they do test for blood glucose, it's usually with an A1C or a fasting glucose, which can sometimes give you a false negative. NutriSense is a company that supplies continuous glucose monitors. We've paired with NutriSense to get you real-time data to see how your physiology responds to glucose. The NutriSense app lets you track your daily activity to see how food, sleep, exercise, and stress impact your glucose. You can log or import this data into the NutriSense app to see the effect on your blood glucose levels as soon as it happens. Use the code DrChris25 for $25 off your order today. Do you have unexplained pain, or do you wonder just how healthy you are? When was the last time you had your blood tested? Blood chemistry analysis is a great tool to stay ahead of any health conditions, and now you can have control of your health with Let's Get Checked. Let's Get Checked is an incredible company that sends blood tests to your home. You can choose from over 30 different tests, whether that's thyroid function, testosterone, micronutrient, cholesterol, or C-reactive protein, which is a marker for inflammation. It is sent to you with free shipping, and you get your results in 2 to 5 days. No physician referral needed. Use the code DPT25 for 25% off. You can find links in the show notes. Did you know that you can get started with physical therapy without a physician's referral? Physical therapists don't just solve pain, we get down to the root cause and keep it from coming back. We also discuss all things health, such as nutrition and lifestyle changes. If you feel that you could use some help, let's get on a free consult call. Go to www.dynamicnaples.com and sign up for a free call. Also, if you like this podcast, please give us a rating wherever you listen to podcasts. It helps us spread the message. Thanks for listening, and we'll see you next week.